Welcome back. The title of this mini lecture is The 30 Years' War, and we're going to talk about 5 terms that, as you read more about this topic, it's good to key in on them in order to get a sense of what happened. Let's get into it. The first term is Phase 1. So, in 1617, 1618, kind of around that time, the Holy Roman Empire is kind of this series of loosely connected principalities and duchies and cities and all this. They're all together under very loosely under an elected emperor, and they've got problems. They've got significant problems, and they've had them for a very long time. Uh, the Peace of Augsburg in 1555, which had made it clear that the faith of one leader was just sort of your own, was the faith of his people. This is, had caused a great deal of difficulty. You had difficulties where lands mostly for Catholic individuals had difficulty accepting Protestant, Lutherans, Calvinists, that kind of thing. And each side had their own organizations, right? So on one side you had what was called the Protestant Union. On the other side you had something called the Catholic League. And what you have between 1617 and 1618 is a series of issues in Bohemia where the king will contribute directly through his actions to a civil war kind of breaking out in Bohemia. He closes the Protestant churches. Protestants will throw a number of the king's men from a castle window in Prague. This is called the defenestration. And so by 1618, war breaks out. And so this is phase 1, and it goes up until about 1625. Bohemians are seeking freedom from the Habsburgs here, and they're going to fight a big battle in 1620 called the Battle of White Mountain. And the whole goal is to kind of eliminate Protestantism from Bohemia. Now this kind of takes us into the second term, which is phase 2. This is the part of the 30 Years' War that is largely defined by the Danes. This is led by King Christian IV of Denmark and the Catholic Albert of Wallenstein, who would lead an army to victories in places like Silesia and the Baltic and Pomerania and that kind of thing. Albert would have disagreements with the mission of the Catholic League, divide his forces. His power would peak, certainly, but the Habsburg Emperor would issue something called the Edict of Restitution, which happens in the year 1629, where all Catholic properties ceded to the Protestants since 1552 were given back, and Catholics and Lutherans are going to be allowed to kind of worship. This kind of brings us into phase 3, which is our third term, which is dominated by the Swedish. This is when King Gustavus Adolphus arrives in Germany. He's kind of driven to get into this war because of his Lutheran faith. The Swedes are financially backed by Cardinal Richelieu and the French because they kind of want to lessen the impact of the Habsburgs, the influence of the Habsburgs in Europe. Adolphus was a fairly effective military leader, and in 1631 his army is victorious at the Battle of Breitenfeld. They win again at Lutzen in 1632, but Adolphus was wounded. After Adolphus dies, the French enter the war after a Swedish defeat in 1634. That takes us to our fourth term, which is phase 4, or the French, the role of the French. So the role of the French really kind of defines the last dozen years or so of the 30 Years' War. So from about 1635 all the way up until about 1648. Richelieu and the French declare war in Spain. They support actions against the Spanish and the Habsburgs, and the whole idea of this is sort of making France only stronger. This is really when you start to see societal breakdowns across large portions of Europe, especially within modern Germany. This really is a period of utter destruction. Plundering is committed at random by sort of opposing forces. Armies don't place a premium on logistics in terms of supplying their armies, and so violence against civilians and sexual violence and this kind of thing become fairly commonplace. By 1648, though, there is nominal peace, and that brings us to our fifth point, which is the Treaty of Westphalia, or the Peace at Westphalia, which is articulated in 1648, which brings an end to the war. Nominally, the Holy Roman Empire is going to continue to exist. Nominally, you're going to see a return to some of the conditions that existed with the Peace of Augsburg back in 1555. Maintenance of this idea of the leader's faith being one's own. But one of the other sort of there's a lot of outcomes from this war. One of them being just the utter civil destruction that existed in Germany, something that they would not see again until the mid-20th century. You're going to start to see really kind of the transformation of certain aspects of the German states. You're going to see, in terms of military history, the rise of the use of direct and structured uniforms and military culture transforming after this war. The 30 Years' War has a number of implications. All right. Thanks so much.